Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com. Hey, it's Kevin Lawton from the New Warehouse Podcast here, introducing you to today's guest, Keith Ingels of the Raymond Corporation. Keith and I discuss Raymond's lean management program on today's show, but first, let's start with his safety tip.
So our tip for today is start with a very organized area. 5S is a great way, but make sure the area is not cluttered and debris and clutter free so that it's easier for associates to pass, and keep training in place to make sure those areas stay organized.
Thanks for sharing, Keith. Want to share a safety tip of your own? Head over to speakpipe.com/thenewwarehouse. That's speakpipe.com/thenewwarehouse to let us hear it. Now a word from our sponsor, 6 River Systems.
Fulfillment demand continues to skyrocket and outpace available labor. To keep up, warehouse operators are turning to flexible fulfillment solutions like 6 River Systems. Utilizing 6 River Systems' award-winning combination of collaborative robots, artificial intelligence, and operational expertise will make your associates and wall-to-wall fulfillment workflow more efficient. No new infrastructure, no change to warehouse layout, easy to deploy and scale, easy to train and retain associates, all at half the cost of traditional automation. Want to take your fulfillment operation to the next level? Go to www.6river.com to learn more. That's www.6river.com to learn more.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. On today's episode, I am going to be joined by Keith Ingels. He is the RLM Manager of Solutions and Support Centers at the Raymond Corporation. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about, he's going to tell us what RLM stands for, of course. And then we're going to get into a little bit about lean and kind of the first steps to take as through a lean journey, and kind of what a successful lean implementation is. And I think, talk a little bit about how has lean either been effective or maybe had some difficulty during COVID as well. I think it would be an interesting discussion. So, Keith, welcome to the show. How are you?
Well, thanks, Kevin. I really appreciate you having me today. I'm doing very well. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We've talked to some of your colleagues at Raymond before, so happy to have you on to talk about things from the lean perspective. I know Raymond is a part of Toyota Corporation, so there's obviously a lot of lean and continuous improvement things going on there. But I guess before we get started, I mentioned, you're going to tell us what RLM stands for. So why don't you do that first? Sure.
So RLM stands for Raymond Lean Management, and that's Raymond's adaptation of Toyota Production System. So our more famous big brother, if you will. Mm-hmm. So we've been a division of Toyota for some 20 years, and very pleased to be associated with both companies. Raymond has a very long history in material handling and customer service. And we were what I would call fertile soil for a more structured continuous improvement approach that Toyota Production Systems brought us. And our adaptation, every continuous improvement journey, every lean journey is a little different. And so ours has evolved into what we refer to as Raymond Lean Management. The concepts and things are based in the same roots, but this is our adaptation, and it's specifically really geared to logistics and material handling.
Great. Very, very cool to hear, too. And I know that talking to some of your colleagues before, they mentioned some things about the continuous improvement and everything at Raymond, but It sounds like you're the guy that's really in the weeds there, I guess, with the continuous improvement. So it'd be great to hear from your experience. So we're talking about Raymond here. Obviously, we talked about them on the show before and had guests from Raymond on the show. But for those maybe listening to the podcast for the first time or never heard of Raymond, not familiar with what you guys do, why don't you just give us a little brief overview of what Raymond is and what it is you guys do?
Sure. So Raymond's been it's a long-term company. They've been focused on material handling for going on 100 years now, actually. And the claim to fame from the organization is George Raymond and his team actually patented the pallet. Right. So we've had some impact to the material handling world. We make really excellent electrical equipment for the warehouse and full systems and automation and the whole area of support for equipment and support for material handling for companies. So anyone that moves any material is a potential customer of ours, and it's been a lot of fun. I've been in this industry for a long time.
All right, great. And I couldn't say it better myself. So we want to talk about lean continuous improvement today, and that's you're the guy to talk to. I think you're just mentioning before we got on to recording here that you have kind of an extensive background in that. So why don't you give us just a little bit of information on that and kind of how you came into the continuous improvement type of thinking and way?
Sure. So I'd been interested in for a long time, but really I started on the Toyota side in the material handling side of Toyota. And frankly, one of the struggles we had was we didn't have enough resources. One of the big struggles was space. And when I got into the system learning, it really helped us with our throughput and our use of space and how we organize the workplace. And we were able to do a lot more with the resource constraints we had. And that impressed me because I'm like, wow, this stuff, it really works. And then after I joined Raymond, I actually had the opportunity to work with a sensei from Toyota for a little over 2 years.
Nice.
And that was great fun. He's very tough, Hayakawa-san, very tough, but I learned a lot from him, and he had a great impact on me. And now I share that with our network and customers when appropriate.
Very interesting. I'm curious actually because I've heard of people that are involved in continuous improvement and lean, and they get a sensei. And you said you're lucky to get one. So how do you go about getting a sensei?
Well, if I'll say that you got to be a little bit lucky, and in that I mean luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And so I'd done a lot of preparation work and fell into the opportunity at Raymond. And when they were choosing a site to send Hayakawa-san to, they chose the sites that I worked at.
Oh, okay, very interesting. So it was pretty much luck, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to call it luck. Like I said, when preparation meets opportunity. It's one of my coaching points. We don't control when opportunity arises, but we control getting prepared, for the thing, opportunity in the meantime. And opportunity are usually what customers present us. So.
Very interesting. Okay. Yeah, I was curious about that. So now let's take it, I guess, from the beginning, right? So, say a company or an individual that wants to start down on this lean and continuous improvement journey, and start to bring that thinking into whatever it is they're doing, maybe personally or in their operation or their department or maybe their company overall. What is really the initial kind of first step to take to start that lean continuous improvement journey?
Well, Kevin, that's a great question. And the answer I'll give your audience, I don't know if they'll expect this answer, but it's really the first step is learning to believe that you're going to have a big impact through small and consistent changes in how you do things and how you approach your work areas and your work. And those small and consistent changes start to add up. And that's when people become what I'll say, truly believers in the system and realize that it does work. And you can apply it anywhere at home or work. I mean, you can apply it in small stages. It's effective. But it's really getting over that belief that you can do these things, because the targets we put out for people are pretty aggressive. So I can't do that. I can't do that. So sometimes we'll actually hide the potential targets from them just to get them to take the small steps. And then later they'll hit those targets. It's a lot of fun to see that change. And you mentioned it's a thinking. And that's exactly what it is, Kevin. It's a way of thinking about your workplace.
Interesting.
There's two value adds we bring to work. And the one, is providing whatever whatever the customer needs, right? Whatever our customer needs from us. That could be an internal customer or an end customer. And the other value add is thinking about how we can do that in better ways or make it easier. A lot of managers will ask, well, how do I become more efficient?
Right.
That's a difficult question to answer, Kevin. So the way I reframe it is, tell me how to make your work easier. And usually then people give me a list. Oh, wait, this and this and this and this. Great. That list is opportunities for us to execute. I find that associates want to deliver great value to their customers, but sometimes they don't step back from the day-to-day and think about how they might do that more easily. Right. And if it's easy, it also tends to be effective and efficient, which is our goals. Those are outcomes. We don't press those. Those are results.
Very interesting. Yeah. And I think you have a great point there about, not taking a step back from basically the daily process you're doing over and over, right? You're never taking that bigger look. Like you're not taking that step and looking at yourself doing the process essentially and seeing, what is the bigger picture and, what is your process contributing to either on the front end or the back end or the overall goal of the operation, which is to deliver to the customer, right? So,
yes.
I'm curious within that, and we talked about how it's a thinking, right? So, and
yes.
We talked about how initially you need to see these smaller steps to get to a bigger goal. How do you deal with, and I'm sure you've come across this, where the thinking people are having a hard time getting there in terms of the thought of being able to do these tinier steps to get to a bigger impact. How do you deal with the individuals who are struggling to wrap their head around the concept?
Well, that's a problem we face routinely. It's almost I can't think of a time we didn't have that problem. People were resistant, but it's really helping people to see. First, you have to engage the associates. I'll ask the question: who's the expert of the work? Mm-hmm. And the expert of the work, people get this answer right every time. They're like, well, that's the person doing the job. Oh, great. So we know the expert is the one doing the work. So then what value add do I bring as a coach to work I may not be familiar with? I ask great questions and to help them see the opportunities, to help them step back and, instead of looking at that tree in front of them, maybe see the whole forest, right? Or start to look at things a little differently.
Right.
The other thing is teaching them how to break it down and concentrate on the small next step in front of you. I was on a call with a coordination group recently. There were two coordination groups. One I had worked with in the past, and the other group we were getting ready to work with, and they're just starting out, and they were listening to the group we'd worked with in the past who are doing quite well now. And they were talking about, how many invoices the invoices they come in, they process them the same day. And I heard the reaction like, wait a minute, we have a stack of invoices. We can't get them all out, the same day. Mm. And I kind of chuckled at that, Kevin, because the group that was telling them that were in far worse shape when they started. And then they had the same resistance and the same concerns. They're like, we can't get to that. Like, yeah. Okay, well, what can we do? And we start to measure that and make those small improvements. And we call small improvements Kaizen.
Right.
And through small Kaizen, you'll see results like right now, the group that's helping promote that over something like 96 or 97% of their invoices go out the same day they come in. They process the order same day. Now, when they started, that was more like if they got it within a couple of weeks, they were ecstatic. So those kind of results are what we move towards. There was a group doing equipment installs in Fort Worth, one of my favorite stories. Mm-hmm. They took their installation time down from 4 hours to just over an hour.
Wow.
And that was over about a 12-month period. Yeah. And had we gone into them and said, hey, you've got to cut 3 hours out of the 4 hours you spend on this installation. Well, Kevin, they'd have shut down right now.
They would have had a heart attack, right?
But absolutely. They'd passed out. It would have been a short conversation. But instead, we started focusing on what can we do to make it better and make it easier. And Kevin, I can tell you, everything changed. The way we brought in equipment, the way it was staged, the way it went through their bay and work areas, the way it shipped out, everything changed in these small incremental ways. So it was no one thing that led to that result. And it was over time that they executed. And now they're like, man, I can't believe how much we used to struggle with it, right? These are great conversations. The same as the coordination group, the coordinators that went through that transition, they had a lot of struggles and they were very frustrated on their work because they weren't delivering a good customer experience, right? In this case, they were supporting the sales team. The sales reps were calling in, hey, did you get my order in? Did you get my order in? I'm waiting for a customer response. And they hadn't. And so it was very frustrating. They were shortfalling their expectation. But over time, now they're exceeding it consistently. And so morale's, we use that as a metric. I mean, it's hard to measure, but it's good to be aware of morale, because if morale is up, that tends to tell us we're doing the right things. People's morale tends to go up when they're executing well for their customer. Be that internal or external, when they're doing things that they know people find value in.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's an interesting point there you had at the end is, the morale goes up, and you can certainly see that. And, I work in the warehouse and have experience as a warehouse manager. I've certainly seen where, the company has something that's occurring that's like frustrating to the employee themselves, who's either shipping the order, picking the order, and you can tell their morale kind of goes down because they don't understand, like, well, why is the company doing something like this, or why did they set up this product like this? It doesn't make any sense. It's too confusing. All those things, and you see, like, they get kind of frustrated with it. And you have a great point there. I think that's a pretty interesting point. I wanted to take a step back and talked about kind of the idea of the challenge to change the way people are thinking about things, and being able to kind of accept this idea of taking these small steps to have a big impact. I'm curious, from a interview perspective for new employees, whether, it's at the lowest level in the organization or the highest level, what do you ask these potential employees? Because obviously you can't always get someone that has lean and continuous improvement experience. So for someone that comes in, a candidate that doesn't have that type of experience, what kind of questions can you gear towards them to see if they will have a good mindset or be potentially accepting of this thought process of continuous improvement and lean?
Sure. Well, we can find continuous improvement where people have applied it in other areas previously, and that may be on the job or that may be at home. Just tell me about a time when you saw something that was maybe frustrating you, to your point, and what you did to improve that, or tell me what you did to change it. And you can usually get out from an associate things that they've engaged with. Because remember, sometimes in the workplace, we forget that our value add is finding that frustration and starting to remove it. Because that frustration is probably a barrier. Like, I don't understand. Oh, we got new software and I haven't been trained on it, so I don't know how to use it right. That's frustrating. We have equipment and I don't know how to use it. Or the flow to this doesn't make sense to me. I'm always having to walk around, these pallets or drive around this aisle to get to what I need, right? These small things are what we want to find that they've done previously. And that means they've got that mindset's open for it. And in the job place, we'll tend to coach it from setting up your workplace first. And there's 3 areas we coach it if they're a good fit. Okay. The first is workplace effectiveness. And workplace effectiveness, you say, well, every workplace is effective. Well, a lot of people will tell me that. Well, that's not really true. A lot of things in a workplace are set up because that's just where we put it when we set it up initially. Right. And we maybe didn't go back and revisit, hey, is this the easiest way we could do it, or do we see an easier way? one of my favorite stories about that is I was in a group, and one of my favorite associates I worked with, Robert, we were in his area, and he asked me to help him with 5S. 5S is a way to organize your workplace. Mm-hmm. He had it clean. It was labeled right. So you say, well, maybe it's good 5S. We had this cabinet that was like 14 paces away from him. And I asked him, I said, there's this area here where you have a bandsaw and a drill press, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, how often do you get in that cabinet? Oh, 2-3 times a day. Mm. How often do you use the drill press and the bandsaw? Oh, once a month. And we ended up, I asked him, I said, could you switch them? Mm. And he's kind of looking at me like, well, yeah. After he realized he's getting in the cabinet more frequently. Yeah. And I saw him about a year ago before the shutdown of travel. Mm-hmm. Just happened to run into him. He's very excited to tell me, oh, I'm still making improvements. I'm doing this and that. He had pictures. It was very funny. Yeah. And he told me, he said, I didn't believe in this 5S stuff until the day we moved that cabinet. And I thought, man, what a great closing to that story, because he got now that it worked. And that's what we want all associates to go through, that epiphany moment that this stuff is simple, but it does work. And from there, we take them from workplace effectiveness into the customer experience, which, what do we want as customers? Mm-hmm. On time, defect free, or how we present it. So if we concentrate on those two areas, we give a great customer experience. And happy customers equals a healthy organization.
Exactly. Right. And I think it's interesting. You talked about we were talking about taking like small little steps to get to the big thing, and it sounded like this guy, I think he said his name was Robert. He took a tiny step for him to have this big like eureka moment, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's pretty interesting.
Well, and when people get empowered to take that first step, then Kevin, what are they going to do after that? They're going to take more steps. Mm-hmm. Once we learn to take that, once we learn that first step's okay, it's like, hey, I can take another step. I had an associate once, and she was having trouble putting together standard work for documenting standards for a process that only she did. It was in the systems area that she was a specialist. Mm-hmm. And she's like, if ever anything, if she was out or needed to be away, nobody else knew what she did. She had never documented her process. She came to me very frustrated one day. She says, I don't have 3 or 4 hours to stop what I'm doing and write down a standard for that I'm processing. I'm too busy.
Right.
I said, could you write down, how long would it take you to write down one step in the process? Mm. Oh, I don't know, a few seconds, maybe a minute. Oh, could you do one of those a day? Yeah. And Kevin, I swear I could see the light bulb go over her head, clicked on. She said, wait, give me one a day. Don't stop and do a whole process.
Yeah.
There's no law that says you have to do an entire standard in one sitting, right? You can write one step. And after a few weeks, and she'd wrestled with this for months, but after a few weeks, she came to me and she says, hey, I've gotten a couple of standards documented. She said, sometimes I cheated though. I said, really? What do you mean? Some days I'd write 2 or 3 steps. I said, well, that's great. Yeah. Because we didn't affect her work, but she was able to implement it. And that's the other thing, Kevin, I'll tell people when we start talking about setting up visuals, we want visual workplaces that we can all see as a team, right? When for years as a manager, I would walk into an office and say, all right, service team, how are we doing today? How's service invoicing going? And the team would say, oh, fine. And I'd say, great, fine. And I'd walk off as a manager. Yeah. Now, fine to me meant all the invoices older than 30 days have been processed. Right. Fine to the team went, hey, we finally got that one really difficult PO we were after. Okay, wait a minute. We're not on page here, but we both said fine.
Yeah.
So visuals in the workplace are great, but people will put too much effort into them. So I give them a rule of thumb is for every 10 minutes you spend putting a visual together, you should get back 20 minutes or more in workplace. So for every little bit you put in visual, you should get twice as much or more back in productivity. Visuals are there to help you, not to hinder your work. If you're spending all day doing visuals, guess what? That's not happy customers. Customers don't care about your visuals, right? They care about executing whatever product or service they want. So,
interesting. So, the visual aspect, I guess, in the regard that you just mentioned, is kind of in the sense of, I guess, metrics and being able to visualize what the metrics are, and like as you said, having the same idea of what fine means. But obviously, there's also visualization of where things are supposed to be, whether it's taped out or kind of shadow boards and things of that nature. So, do you apply that same thinking to those types of visualizations too, as well, or is that kind of different thinking?
Well, it's a great way to start the thinking, Kevin. That's a great question, because it's a great way to start the thinking. I'm working with a group now out west, and doing it virtually, because travel these days, right?
Yeah.
But getting pictures of this area, and the area is chaos. And the manager that's in charge of the project that she's putting this team together, she reached out for some help and some coaching. And she says, this area is chaos and nobody's cleaning it up. And I told her, I said, I said, when an area is in chaos, people don't clean it up because they're trying to be respectful. And there's this awkward pause, trying to be respectful. They won't clean it up. I said, yeah. I said, you walk out in a chaotic environment, you don't know what goes where. You don't know why anything's out there. Yeah. So you don't touch anything because it might be important to somebody, right?
Right.
So you're trying to be respectful by not touching it. So when we start those visuals, it's an outside storage area, and one of the things they store is pallets. Okay, great. How many pallets do you need? Well, we don't have that number. Great. So when we get that number, it needs to be could be a mark on the wall, for height, right, to measure. It could be a count, but something that tells us how many pallets do we need. Over that, get rid of the rest of them. Right. So right now it's just everybody throws the pallets out there, right? Some of them are good, some of them are not. Well, what makes a good pallet? How many slats can be broken and still okay, right? I mean, we haven't answered any of these questions. So visuals help us with that. Where does it go? How many do we need? And and who's in charge? That's another challenge I've had myself for many years, Kevin. I'd say, oh, well, service team's in charge of that. Okay, if everyone's in charge, no one's in charge. I've learned that through experience. If you say the services team is responsible for that area, then everybody in service thinks somebody else in service is doing it.
Right.
So you have to assign ownership. And one of the things you should do is make that visual. Put the person's name or even their picture up. And I've had managers say, oh, people are going to get upset. You put their picture over an area. The only pushback I've ever had, Kevin, is people want to make sure it's a good picture. It's true. They're really proud of that area. When that area looks good and it shines and they have their picture and their name up there, guess what? That is a way of recognizing people.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to cost a lot of money to recognize people and say, wow, this area looks fantastic. And, oh, that's your area. That's fabulous. That's kudos. That makes them feel good. That's that morale factor we're looking for, right? So visuals in the workplace setup is a great way to start, rather than jumping into metrics, because that tends to be a little more difficult, more challenging, more effective over time, right? But we'll start with simple things like, where do things go? Where do things need to go? Visuals help us move. The other thing with starting visuals, Kevin, is don't make them too permanent to start, because you're going to change it.
Right.
Once you start to organize, you find a better way to organize. So I will have people get upset with me, like, I keep labeling things all the time. What am I doing labeling things? I said, well, what's the value add of this area? I just want to know where things are. Could you take a picture and print it and hang it up and everybody know? Yeah. I had a vendor that did that to me. They got really upset. They were working out their tool area, and they did industrial battery servicing. And I kept changing the tool area, and they were labeling everything. And every week they'd change all the labels. So just take a picture and put it up. Your value add is not the labels. Your value add is, can somebody walk up and see where things go? It doesn't necessarily mean labels. Do what's easy and what's effective.
Right.
So again, it gets back, don't put too much time in the visuals. The visual is not the intended goal. Having the stuff where we need it is the objective.
Very interesting. Yeah, and that's a good tip there about taking the picture versus relabeling over and over. And certainly been in the label crowd as well, doing lots of labels. So I like that actually. It's a really good tip there as well. And you mentioned about the traveling situation now. Obviously, we've been dealing with the pandemic for the last year now. I'm curious, from a lean continuous improvement perspective, do you think having that type of culture implemented into an organization has made it easier to deal with COVID, or do you think some of the restrictions has made it a little more difficult?
Well, from a perspective of rising to the challenge that COVID brings, a continuous improvement culture, a continuous improvement mindset is going to be very much more effective at dealing with these kinds of changes. So Kevin, I know you're a fan of continuous learning, for example. I mean, I think that's one of the things that got you doing this podcast, right?
Yes, that's correct. You did your research too, I see.
A little bit. Well, continuous learning and continuous improvement, they go hand in glove. And if you're going to improve something, that means you're going to do it differently than you've done it before, right? So that means you're going to have to gain new knowledge and new experience. When we learn that that's not intimidating, right, then something changes. We're more adaptive. And one of the terms I use a lot, I want to create with our groups organizational agility. And Kevin, what do I mean by organizational agility? It's the ability to move with the market or the environment or the customer. In the case of the pandemic, one thing 2020 taught us is things can change rapidly and dramatically really quickly.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And the organizations that were ready to move quickly did very well in it. And so they were more organizationally agile, right? They had associates or leaders or people in place. And leadership can come from all levels, not just the top levels, but leadership on the ground floor, right? Leadership to do things differently and to adapt to the changing conditions. So COVID is just a really, in my mind, great test of how organizationally agile are we? Are we adapting to this effectively?
Yeah, very interesting. I guess I'm curious about that. I guess I've never worked or operated in like a true lean continuous improvement culture. So I was very curious about how the pandemic has kind of maybe been challenging or has been met very well from that perspective. And I can see, the way you're putting it in terms of having that agility. I guess it really kind of made it a little easier probably to be able to shift things around and be more fluid in the thinking of the way things now have to be processed or in what order, and how do we do things with people socially distanced as well. So really, really interesting to hear your perspective on that. I'm curious before we close out here on the discussion. What has been, and give us a lot of great stories today, which I think helps you to learn from a lot of these things. And I always love to hear like the lean and continuous improvement experience, because there's always like that, like you mentioned here, like several times, like there's always like that eureka moment, which is really, really cool. And I'm curious, what has been your most challenging project in terms of implementing lean or just dealing with some kind of continuous improvement project in an operation, and how were you able to, I guess, meet that challenge and overcome it?
Well, the one challenge, and we talked about earlier, that I face routinely is getting that realization that these methods work, because a lot of times the methods seem very simple. Well, you just want to organize my workplace. Okay, but let's start there, right? And getting that upper level buy-in and support. It's frequently a challenge to get upper levels and the ground troops all to align to the vision that we're gonna work together to make changes in our workplace and make it better. So it happens with great regularity. I walk into an organization, like I said, the coordination group we're working with recently. They're great. They're open to change, but they're a little intimidated by the process. So we got to walk them through that very gingerly. That happens at some of our sites. We'll walk in, we'll say, oh, we're going to bring continuous improvement. Well, the first thing you got to overcome is people think, oh, you're here to tell me how to do my job. No, actually, you probably know more about your job than I do, right? So I have to teach them that I'm recognizing them as the expert. But I am going to ask them great questions about how to improve it. So it's really calming them down to listen, to hear, and then to start to engage. And then a lot of, especially upper level executives, I can tell you the way I generally have to win them over is to see the impact to customers. I mean, their job is to make sure happy customers, right, and profitability of the organization, and that comes from happy customers. So I usually have to show them the customer impact at some point. And initially, just changing the workplace, there's not a huge customer impact that's visible immediately, right? This takes some time and a little patience. I mean, we want to move this very quickly, but you have to be methodical and move it in stages. You know, those changes, like I said, with both the examples, I used the coordination and the equipment installation. Right. Those are about 9 to 12 month changeovers. Okay. And when you're changing thinking, and that's having some good coaching along the way, you've got to support that environment and give it time to start to have results. Now, once the results start coming in, everybody goes, holy cow, this stuff works. You know, then I know they'll do it. You know, it's like walking in, running into Robert. I hadn't seen him in a couple of years when I saw him last year. Yeah. But there was no doubt in my mind he was going to have many, many changes and improvements in his workplace because he took about 4,000 steps, 4,500 steps out of his workplace during the time we worked together.
Oh, wow.
And he went from like 15,000 steps a day to about 10,000. Now, that's still a lot of steps. Yeah. But, you know, his memory of that was, you know, his knees and his feet didn't hurt as bad at the end of the day. And his manager's memory of that was, yeah, he was getting so much time back in his production. Yeah. Well, it takes about 45 minutes to walk that many steps, right? So, so over time, that time goes back into productive time, right? Fixing forklifts and servicing the equipment. So it takes some discipline to get into that and be effective, but it's a challenge we have to overcome little by little, and it takes some patience. And I want to move really quickly, so that doesn't help either. But I'm excited for people because I know this stuff works. But I have to coach myself sometimes to take it slow and let them. They all have to learn it for themselves. You know, every one of us has to have that, like you said, eureka moment.
Very interesting. Yeah, and I love to hear the stories about this stuff because I always think it's really interesting. And, you know, it's really interesting too, I guess, how people, as they start to get into the mindset, the types of solutions they think of. And, you know, you mentioned something a couple times. You mentioned, and you also mentioned getting them into discipline as well. But I'm curious, how do you discipline yourself to, because it sounds like just from sometimes you know the answer already, but you want them to get to the answer, right, as a coach. So how do you kind of gear your mind to be able to ask the right questions or the good questions to get them there?
Well, that's a great point because I have to do a lot of self-coaching because when I go in, you know, the first thing is I'm so excited about the potential we can reach and because I can see it. I'm like, oh man, I know we can do so great here. And if I let my excitement overtake me, I'll start talking about the incredible results we're going to get, and I'll start really shutting people down. Remember, like I said, that 75% time savings for the equipment installs. You know, like you said, these guys had a heart attack. But, you know, I'm looking at that process like, we can do this. You know, it's very exciting. But I've got to coach myself to be patient and let them learn for themselves. And that comes from, you know, when you have to restrain yourself. I find I have to restrain myself from going in and doing it for them. And remembering my value add is not doing it for them, but helping to guide them through their journey and reinforcing as quickly and as often as I can when they hit the key points that make it make sense. Because a lot of the stuff, it makes sense to people, but they don't look at it through that lens of part of my job is to make my work easier. I don't know how many people walk in the job today say, hey, my job is to make my work easier today. Yeah, I don't think a lot of us feel that's important, but it is a value add. If easy becomes effective and efficient for our customer experience, then we need it to be easier. And there's no need to not have the equipment, tools, supplies, training, knowledge, and experience we have that we need. There's no reason not to have that. We just need to acquire it. So let's not have a difficult workplace. And if we find a difficulty, that's an opportunity. Yeah. And opportunities are great. If things didn't break, most of us wouldn't work. So things breaking, that's not a bad thing.
That's job security.
Right? It is. But we don't always think in those terms. Think, oh, if something's broken, I'll get blamed. Yeah. And that's another piece that we have to coach people on. You know, it can't be a blaming environment to be effective. And I try to help people through that. We have to focus on fix the process. Right. You might put somebody in a process that's just got more knowledge or experience and just works it faster, but they may also be sprinting and they may not be able to sustain that performance either. So we want to make the process effective, and that takes work to see where are the opportunities to make true lasting improvements. And it could be visual, something as simple as visual for what supplies we need and when we're running low so we don't run out.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Very, very great perspectives there and insights into this whole world. And it's interesting to hear about how, the coach needs to self-coach as well. I like that. So I really, really appreciate you coming on the show and talking with me and kind of sharing some insights into this lean and continuous improvement culture. And, lean and continuous improvement, I think, is something, we could just talk probably hours about. There's so much involved in it.
Yes.
But yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you so much. And
thank you, Kevin. Really enjoyed being here. Thanks for having me.
Definitely, yeah. And I'll be happy to have you back as well. So I'm curious, how can people find out more information about the Raymond Corporation?
Sure. So RaymondCorp.com is our website, and there's areas we post links on there, and we put white papers together and try to do things to help get some ideas going. And we want you to, join us on your own journey. Every journey is unique, but we want you to take that journey with us. And like I said, we're very excited about it because we know it works, and it's had big impact, not only at our factory, of course, but throughout our dealer network. And the exciting thing to me is there's so much more impact we still want to have and will have. So we want to help people realize they can do it too. And those small steps add up. So we keep trying to put information out there to reinforce that.
Okay, great. And we'll put links on the newwarehouse.com as well for all that information so people can find it. So Keith, thank you again for coming on the show.
Thanks, Kevin.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.